Hey there, it's Ray Flowers of fantasyguru.com. You can follow me all over the place at the Ray Flowers. Check out your source, look for at the Ray Flowers. Over at fantasyguru.com, we're rocking and rolling here as we start the second week of the NFL season in 2023. And just a couple of notes, things I've talked about in Discord. We're, by the way, in Discord 24 hours a day. The entire staff is there over at fantasyguru.com. If you haven't signed up yet, you can still do that. Use the promo code RADIO20. RADIO20. Still time to get involved. We also have DFS coverage as well if you'd rather play that game. But the staff has been doing a great job answering as many questions as possible in Discord, and there's a lot of them. Get in there, ask your question, get your answer over at fantasyguru.com. Some thoughts about three main topics here. Number one, roster changing. It's a big thing right now. Everyone's running to the waiver wire. The waiver wire article we posted is huge. All the questions about, do I add this guy, drop this guy, that kind of thing. Number one, everyone should understand the following. There's like three reasons to drop a player. One, you didn't believe in the guy and should have drafted him in the first place. Two, the guy got hurt. Or three, there was a drastic change in expectations. Guy getting hurt, well, we have to decide on a case-by-case basis. Does your league have IL spots, all that kind of stuff? Okay. The drastic change, there's not a lot of players that had drastic changes. Okay, we'll talk about a few situations in a second, but not a lot of players that had drastic situations. So it comes down to that third one. If you're going to drop a guy after 4 quarters of football, why did you draft him? It's a simple question, but I mean, there's lots of people asking questions. Should I add this guy, make this move? And it's like, well, we had this guy 14 spots ahead of that guy in the rankings. We had this guy 22 spots ahead of this guy in the ranking. If you chose to draft a team not using our advice, totally fine. It's totally fine. And if you're now rectifying a problem, I was going to say mistake, but everyone's free to draft who they want. If you're rectifying a problem because you took a guy that was ranked 14 spots below this other guy, okay, fine, okay, right? But in most instances, what it really comes down to is someone had a big game in week 1, someone didn't have a big game in week 1 or didn't do anything in week 1, so let's make a roster move. The players you're adding can be helpful players in many instances, but as we talked about many times on the Elite Sports Show this week over at fantasyguru.com, our show on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, hosted by Jeff Mans. It's not just, are you adding a winning player? I got Kyren Williams. Yeah. It's who did you drop? Okay. The drops can be perilous. Think of the situation with Rashad Penny. Rashad Penny was drafted. Rashad Penny was dropped. Now Gainwell's not playing this week on Thursday Night Football. Guess what? Rashad Penny's going to go out there, carry the ball 12 times, get 60 yards rushing, get a touchdown. And then he's going to be everyone's primary ad next week if he's not able to be added this week. So be very cautious. The move you're making may not be the right move in the long term. Secondly, I mentioned Kyren Williams. There's a lot of Kyren Williams, Joshua Kelly talk in particular. Understand that you, number one, should handcuff your running backs. It's something we've preached for years at fantasyguru.com. And based upon all the rosters I see, I know people don't do it. Okay, so what are we doing? We're randomly grabbing running backs hoping to get a hit. And people are going out and spending 25, 35, 40% of their budget to add guys like Kyren Williams and Joshua Kelly. You're spending 25% plus of your budget to add guys that maybe no better than a flex option. And frankly, may not even be a flex option every week. That's rough. That's a lot of money to invest when you could have just taken these guys later in drafts. Kyren Williams is an example. I think we had him ranked 48th to 49th at the running back spot. So if you had Cam Akers, you must 100% have drafted Kyren Williams. Like that was an imperative because we talked all preseason about our concerns with Cam Akers. If you didn't do that, now you got to pay the price. That's tough. Josh Kelly is not a thing if Austin Ekeler is healthy. Austin Ekeler has an ankle issue. He's not a big guy. One of the concerns we do have and expressed in the preseason, well, maybe he misses a couple games, he gets beat up here. But remember this, when Austin Ekeler is healthy, he's touching the ball 15 plus times, and he's the goal line back. So in most weeks, Joshua Kelly is going to touch the ball 6 or 8 times. He's not going to get 16 carries most times like he did in week 1. So you're adding Joshua Kelly because you have Austin Ekeler? Are you adding Joshua Kelly because you need depth? Those things are okay. But if you're spending 25% of your budget expecting to play this guy every week, you're in a tough spot. So be careful how you handle the running backs. Like getting all these questions. Do I drop this guy for this guy and this guy? It's like, okay, but handcuff your running backs. Get the running backs in the right systems. Understand that 5'9", 190-pound backs like Kyren Williams are not going to carry the ball 17 times each week over the course of the season. It's not happening, okay? Understand who these players are, their roles in their offense before you go blowing your budget to add them this early in the season. And then finally, 2 things. One, I did a video, and maybe I'll link to it at the end of this one, about the tight ends, and maybe I won't because I'll basically say the same thing here. I believe that drafting 2 tight ends is a waste of a roster spot, as I've talked about repeatedly. And I did a short at the Ray Flowers on Twitter. I did a full video on YouTube for Ray Flowers. Guys, if once you pass like the top 5 guys, all the players are 5 to like 11 points a week. They're all the same guy, and they're not the same guy, but they're all the same guy in the sense that, 5 to 11, 5 to 11. So 1 week it's 5, then it's 11, then it's 9, then it's 6, then it's 7, then it's 12, then it's 4. That's just how it is. Okay. You have to make a decision at the tight end position and stick. If you're already changing your tight end, if you're already making a move from who you drafted to some new guy, you should have done the following. You should have drafted one of the top 4 or 5 tight ends, because this, roulette wheel that you're playing at the tight end position, you're going to do it all year long. Jake Ferguson might be a thing. Everyone wants Jake Ferguson. He might be a thing. Okay. The Cowboys won 40-0 against the Giants team that they destroyed. Special teams and all that. You can't take much away from that game. Somehow Ferguson got 7 targets on 13 routes run, which is impossible. No one seems to be mentioning the fact that Jake Ferguson dropped 2 passes. Okay. And they had, Dalton Schultz there for a long time, for years, working with Dak Prescott in this offense. And, he was a very solid player, Dalton Schultz. So could we get 60 catches and 600 yards and 5 touchdowns out of Ferguson? Yeah. Is he going to be, breaking the bank and catching 80 passes this year and scoring 10 touchdowns? No. So number 1, it's a mistake to have 2 tight ends. Number 2, be cautious with the jumping at the tight end spot, because it's not going to work. Jake Ferguson will be the guy you all add, and then 3 weeks from now he'll be middling, and you'll make the move to someone else. And in the end, you'll just get 7 points a week, like if you just stuck with Dalton Schultz. That's my thought on that. Then folding into that, the 2 QB thing. If you've got Kirk Cousins and you're not sure if Kirk Cousins is going to get it done, so you drafted Dak Prescott. In theory, I get what you're doing. It makes sense. But in reality, it doesn't help. Because how are you going to decide who to start between Cousins and Prescott each week? They're basically the same guy, right? There's going to be weeks where you obviously choose wrong. And not just that, it's a repetitive piece. Why have 2 of the exact same guy when you could only play one of them? If you drafted Patrick Mahomes, you drafted Josh Allen, why did you bother taking Jimmy Garoppolo? You're never playing Jimmy Garoppolo ever, unless one of those guys gets hurt. And if one of those guys gets hurt, your team's in trouble anyway. And let's not forget that we could still go to the waiver wire and still get Derek Carr who's sitting on the waiver wire. All right. So having 2 quarterbacks, it really, in most instances, unless you have a deep bench, unless it's a super flex league, unless you have weird scoring, unless it's a 2 QB league, in the most traditional 10, 12, 14 team leagues, 2 quarterbacks is not really necessary. And when people did the 2 tight end and 2 quarterback thing, and I've seen this is a mistake. You can't waste 4 roster spots on 2 quarterbacks and 2 tight ends when you're only playing 1 and 1 of each. You hardly ever would use a tight end as a flex, right? Unless your team is in desperate need. And again, I just talked about the quarterback position. So roster construction is important. I think a lot of people blindly take 2 and 2, and it leaves you in a spot where you don't have Josh Kelly on your bench. You don't have Kyren Williams on your bench because you didn't draft these guys because you had that second quarterback and second tight end. So think about that next year when you draft. And then if you're in a situation like that right now, where you have 4 roster spots for those 2 positions, you probably want to take a look at adding some other players to the mix to help you out. Go to fantasyguru.com. Use that promo code radio20 if you'd like to join us. And we hope that you do. I'm Ray Flowers, at the Ray Flowers on all the spots. And don't forget to watch the Elite Sports Show Monday through Friday on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. And one other thing. On Sundays, I'm not in Discord. I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Twitter for SiriusXM. So Sunday mornings, 10 to 1 Eastern time, at SiriusXM Fantasy. Only place to get my advice on Sundays. I'm there for those 3 hours. Let's go get them in week 2. Thanks for listening. I'm Ray Flowers of fantasyguru.com.